Today we're going to talk about a 964, slightly different to our usual, call it setting. We're currently based at a local racetrack, Swartkorps Raceway, just outside Johannesburg. The reason we're here today is specifically due to the nature of this car. This appears to be a somewhat, let's call it standard 964, and we've purposely made her, rather refurbished her or rebuilt her to look as such, but deep down inside she's everything but normal. In fact, it's that balance which I'm going to talk about, and wanting to achieve that kind of balance that I think is critical to kind of understanding and appreciating the nature of this build. But just in terms of quick facts, so she's a 1990 Carrera 2. She came out of Tokyo. She's going back to a wonderful client based out in Tokyo, Japan. Somebody who is, I think, an avid enthusiast and certainly understands the numbers when it comes to vehicles of this nature. And yeah, we were asked to basically build him a 964. Now, we've covered in quite a bit of detail our broader approach to 964s, and there are 2 videos to that effect on the channel which you may want to have a look at. And we cover in those videos what we deem to be, it's kind of a great, let's call it, set of specifications that give kind of common daily driving 964s a really great feel. And there's some key components that we put into them. I'm not going to cover that, and I'm also not going to cover kind of the background to the 964. We've also done that in detail. It's a relatively rare model in terms of production numbers, the rarest of the series, incidentally, so the fewest derivatives of 911s was the 964 in relation to the others. But we're not going to get into that. We're actually going to get into this car and how we built it and why we built it. This is an extremely high performance car, which is why we have her here at the racetrack. We are going to take a drive in her, and you'll get an idea for how she handles and kind of what she does. But this is a high performance car, and let's kind of run through what it is that goes into her. So the target, or the brief for this car, was build a 964 that has got at least the power to weight ratio of a Porsche 964 RS, deliver the power of a Porsche 964 RSR, and see how close we can get to the power to weight ratio of, in fact, a 964 RSR. We spent a lot of time looking at those numbers, and obviously, power to weight means you have to obviously add power, you need to remove weight. And if you look at the RSR, well, that's a particularly kind of race-bred vehicle. And the RS itself is also relatively, let's call it, competitive in terms of how it feels and how it drives. So we took on that challenge, and we comfortably exceeded it, in fact, and I'll get to that at the very end in terms of a summary. I will take you for a quick drive around the track in the car. There is some commentary which is going to be not the best audio. It's not that easy to get right. I'll try and articulate what it is that it feels like to drive a car of this nature. Right, so let's see. This is going to be a slightly different run. We're going to take the car just for a leisurely kind of spin around the track, nothing serious. But the first thing one realizes, even entering the track, that there is an abundance of torque. And what's remarkable about that is that the torque is kind of primarily what it is that affects the feel of a car. One always kind of assumes that power, which is what a lot of people will measure kind of a motor by, is the thing to aim for. But power, frankly, only comes at a maximum power, comes at a very specific and high rev range. And we're probably at it now. Whereas torque comes in at a gear change, gives you the push that you're wanting, and kind of gives you that extremely, let's call it, visceral feel of what it means to drive a car that is powerful. So you can put your foot down, which is what I'm doing now, and I'm sitting at 6,000 revs, 5,000 revs, and the maximum torque curve for this car sits just below 5,000 revs. And that's that little kind of power curve. I'll try and demonstrate what it feels like to hit that power curve on a straight. So here we are sitting at around 3,000 revs, sitting in third gear. There, 4 to 5, that's where maximum torque is. Okay, we've got a few fast cars coming up behind us, so I need to just take this very, very carefully. Yeah. You need to be quite quite that close, but still. So there we are, sitting in our torque curve of between 4 and 5. Put your foot down. Oh, it's lovely. All right, down to third, down to second. The car holds beautifully. It just kind of seems to stick remarkably well, in fact, for a car that's actually carrying quite a bit of weight. You'll also notice that the revs are climbing quite easily and quickly. Well, that's what I'm feeling, at least. For a stock 964, you'd never feel that. We're now in fifth, down to fourth. Let's keep it in fourth and see what happens. Oh, that 3.8 is doing the work. Could be a little faster, maybe in third, but we're ready. Boom, we're into the torque curve. Between 4.5, 5,000. We change. It's almost leisurely the way that this car delivers power. It literally just keeps giving. It's quite remarkable. But this is how we did it. We obviously added a lot more power to the car. We took out some weight. Let's talk firstly about the motor. The motor itself, let's kind of go in there and have a look, shall we? The motor itself, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the fact that the 3.6 litre motor is what would originally have come out, this vehicle would have come out with when it left the factory floor. That 3.6 is now up to a 3.8 litre. That 3.8 litre carries extremely high compression. That high compression is then matched to a custom camshaft. And I'm not going to give away the exact details of it, but it's a custom camshaft. There's also a valve upgrade to this car. There's a lot more air coming in and out of that motor through the valves. And we have a bespoke exhaust system. It retains full heating and cooling, but an entirely reworked exhaust system. So there's a lot more air running through this car. That 3.8 litre motor over there delivers 340 horsepower. To put that into context, a stock 964 comes out at the 250 horsepower mark. So 340 horsepower is coming out of this car. How do we do that? Well, yeah, it's and also, by the way, we are retaining the engine management system and the original injection system. There's obviously some chip hardware or kind of software hardware in there, which makes it that we can make the most of that. So the motor itself is a 3.8 litre upgrade. It delivers a monumental amount of torque, and it's quite remarkable, in fact, to experience that torque, which we will do when we're on the track. Now, having watched that footage on track, you might be misled into thinking that we built a race car, but we didn't. This is a road car. So I think it's only fair that we also do a little bit of road driving. And kind of the point that I'm really going to want to try and make is that the flexibility of this car is quite remarkable, just in terms of, not that you need to drive it like a race car on the road, but what it gives you is that joyous feeling of kind of what you get from being on a racetrack in certain road driving. So we're going to take a drive in the traffic, actually, and I'm going to try and explain one or two things to you as to how that feels. First thing is, and I hope the sound's working out, the track sound is not the easiest thing to get right, but the cabin is totally insulated. I mean, this is a quiet car. What I've already just demonstrated there is just how quickly this car can pick up revs, and that's based on the lightweight flywheel. So let's take off, try and weave into the traffic here, and let's see how we do. I guess one of the difficult things, and this is from, it's working already. One of the difficult things about building very high performance cars is that you kind of have to give up certain things when building high performance. It usually has got to do with comfort, and you know, for a second, half a second, for a tenth of a second, or even a hundredth of a second, you know, competitive races will give up frankly anything. So performance and comfort tend to kind of be diametrically opposed. So we've not lost any of that in this car whatsoever. The car's got full air conditioning, full heating, full entertainment system, which will be replaced with the PCCM when she gets to Japan. There's nothing here that's been foregone. It's got a sunroof. We've not thrown stuff out so that we can get, an additional second around the track, or half a second around a track, and you end up using a car once, twice, 3 times perhaps a year in some form of competitive environment, bumpy road, and for that you have a full year of discomfort. No, the car to me needs to deliver comfort, and when I say comfort, everyone's got their own degrees of comfort, but you need to be, in your world, comfortable in that car. You will then drive that car. It needs to be usable, it needs to be practical. If you want an out-and-out race car, fabulous, go and get an out-and-out race car. When you blend the two, there's a balance to be met, and I believe that this car really, really hits that balance. Then, let's carry on in terms of, I guess, performance. If you're going to put 340 horsepower into a vehicle of this nature, you're going to have to make sure that it's able to kind of get down to the ground and not give you trouble. So the car's also on upgraded suspension, all totally hidden. The 964s come out with coilover suspension per se. That suspension, however, is upgraded to performance coilovers, obviously performance dampers. That gives us a lot more, let's call it, flexibility in terms of the setup of this car. She's not aggressively set up at the moment. She's got a little bit of camber to the rear, but the front is pretty stock. But it gives us the ability to set her up as aggressively as we wish. So she's got upgraded suspension, which is obviously key. There's a particularly important aspect of this vehicle, though, which is really quite special, which is she carries a very rare 993 Cup car transmission, a 6-speed transmission. It was a piece of equipment which was brought to us by somebody, and we found the perfect home for it, which is the build in this car. A Cup car transmission, other than the fact that it's extremely rare, delivers a number of major benefits. And in this case specifically, obviously there's an additional gear, but the entire gear ratios are shorter. So you've got an incredibly tight box, which is running tighter, shorter, obviously closer gear ratios, and a higher final drive, which makes this car extremely lively. And if you match it to high levels of torque, it drives like literally nothing else. I've never driven a 911, not least a 964, that drives like this car. It is extremely light-footed. So I'm in fourth, and this car is now sitting at 4,500 revs. There's a tightness to this box, which I've tried to articulate on the track, but you actually feel it more on the road than you do on the track. The ratios are much closer, much tighter on the Cup box. The shifting is much tighter than a normal 5-speed box on a 964. What connects that transmission through to the 340 horsepower 3.8 litre motor is then an RS spec lightweight flywheel and clutch. The flywheel allows us to pick up revs very, very quickly. Obviously those revs drop and rise very, very quickly. It leads to the most engaging drive, and I'm hoping to be able to show you some of that when we're on the track. This car is fleet-footed and light-feeling with an abundant amount of power. I mean, the torque figures on this car, at 424 Newton meters of torque, in relation to a stock 964 of 310, is, we're talking 30% plus increases in torque. And that torque is what it is that a car feels like when it drives. So high amounts of torque, large amounts of power coming through a very tight box, a Cup racing box, which in itself also has got an entirely different feel in terms of how it engages gears, how it delivers that kind of speed through then a kind of a flywheel that picks up speed very quickly. This car is an absolute joy to drive. So there's a lightness to this car, there's a nimbleness, which again, it's not a formula which you can kind of just put in place, where there's a specific torque curve that matches a gear change, and then you're able to push that speed up to when you hit maximum power, and you put it back into another gear or drop a gear, raise a gear, and as you kind of engage that gear, you end up in your torque curve, and there's that magical relationship between power and torque and gearing. And there's a little bit of alchemy at play, and it's not just chemistry. And I'll admit to something here, which is we don't always know how these cars are going to turn out.
And there's a very interesting kind of, let's call it, result of mixing power and torque and weight and transmission, and you never really know what it's going to do when you get there. And this one, or this particular combination, which is this particular motor, or the way in which the motor has been built, the way that it comes through a lighter flywheel, the tightness of the box, it's not anything that I could have foreseen, or we could have foreseen. We now know what that lovely recipe is, but we didn't know what it would be when we set out. And what we've got here is something which is truly quite remarkable.
And whilst we're sitting here on a track, as the sun goes down, the reality is that this car will not spend a vast amount of time on the track. It wasn't built to be a race car. It was built to be a road car. But this road car delivers that all the best of what a race car can, but perfectly suited to the road. Just in terms of weight loss, let's talk about weight loss for a second. There's not a hell of a lot of weight one can take out of a 964 unless you start replacing panels with carbon and so on. I'm fairly wary of too much carbon going into a car, but what she does have is she has a carbon front hood, and there's one or two. By the way, this car is still in final testing. We're very happy with the gaps, but what you will find, just in terms of one of the downsides of carbon, is that they tend to be slightly thicker in terms of profile. But that there is a carbon hood which takes at least 10 kilograms off the front weight of the nose of this car. The car is also being delivered with its steel hood. In fact, she'll ship with her steel hood. And if the client wants to go out for a little bit of track time, they can do that. And then another firm favorite of ours is our carbon Recaro seats, or Recaro styled seats. They obviously save a fairly significant amount of weight, but more importantly, they attach you to the car, and I do cover that in other videos. So the feel of these seats in terms of their comfort is one thing, but what they give back to you is what the car is doing, and that all comes through kind of the way in which these seats are designed to hug you. The car talks to you, and you feel the drive. You drive much better in a seat that supports you. Also a tiny amount of weight saving, arguably, on the rarest door cards that have been fitted. And that, I guess, in total kind of comprises how much weight we were able to take out. There's one more small delete as well, which is the rear seats. The fold down seats have been removed. The reason for that is that there is a small amount of weight to be lost in the back, but the Recaros do also compromise the extent of access to the rear of the car, so they don't really play much of a role. The only other thing within the cabin that's worth pointing out is the Porsche Classic Momo steering wheel. It really does provide, in this case specifically because it's such a high performance car, provides a really engaging feel, and obviously the diameter being smaller gives you a tighter turning circle, so the car simply feels more alive. So as a whole, we took out an amount of weight. The car comes in at 1,200 kilograms, and that starts to then deliver to us some really interesting power to weight ratio figures. So just to come back, the stock 964, 250 horsepower, 310 newton meters of torque. An RS, 260 horsepower, 325 newton meters of torque, and then an RSR, Porsche state, as being 325 horsepower. I think they're understating that quite materially. I think it's certainly north of 340 in actual fact, but let's stick to their published figures. 325 horsepower with torque at 360 newton meters. This car delivers 340 horsepower at just under 6,000 revs and 424 newton meters of torque at just under 5,000 revs. And what that then gives us is quite a remarkable achievement, which is we hit a power to weight ratio of 0.275 horsepower per kilogram. And that is in fact just greater than the published figures of a Porsche 964 RSR, which sits at 0.2664. Now, that's fine and well, and those are figures, and they're wonderful kind of figures to talk about, with, I don't know, friends over a drink. The most important thing here is that this car is race, kind of, let's call it, capable, that its ability to deliver that power on a standard road is remarkable. She drives extremely comfortably. She runs and purrs like a kitten, and yet she pulls like a tractor when she needs to. There's a full catalytic converter on the back of this car, so we haven't even kind of foregone that. And it's got full air conditioning, and it's got all the let's call it the creature comforts that one would want. And let's call it a car that you want to use on a daily basis. You might take it to the track on the weekend. You might, I don't know, have a Porsche club meeting, and you might have a whole lot of fun. You could even fit slicks on her and potentially enter the likes of a hill climb. That's not really the reason that we built her. We built her to do a really special thing, which is kind of be both. Give me a car that can kind of deliver race car numbers, but let me drive it around Tokyo, and just have that absolute joy of what it feels like to have a quick, slick gear change, have that kind of push in the pit of your stomach when the torque kicks in. Take it all the way up to 6th gear, and if you want to, on numbers, this car should, at least on numbers, do 300 kilometers an hour. I certainly haven't done that. Somewhat of a risk, given the fact that it's not my car, but she can go fast. But regardless of all that, does she look it? Does she try to look fast? Does she have this, a ghost stripe down the middle and a wing and a flare? Not at all. And this is where I'm going to come back to, is if you're going to build a car that's extremely fast, has very high spec, which is what we set out to do here, the client and I agreed from the very outset that she would be understated. She would not try to appear anything other than what she was the day she left the factory for. And that's exactly what we've done. We've in fact, and this is what I call a key kind of balance that I like to strike, we've pulled back on the aesthetics, and we've kind of retained purposefully her stock wheels, those 8 and 9J Cup 1 wheels. We've gone with a paint scheme that is understated, because there's nothing better than having a car that is extremely capable but doesn't shout it, versus a car that tries to look fast and doesn't quite pull it off. And it's that balance of understatedness and elegance that I really love about this car, because at face level, that's what she presents herself as being. And then you get inside her, and she snaps your head back, and you smile from ear to ear. So that's pretty much it, and that's an overview of our Tokyo build. And once again, thank you very much for watching.
Now, there's just one other thing that I want to touch on, and it's somewhat contentious, and it comes down to aesthetics. There is, I sincerely, personally, cannot for the life of me understand why it is that somebody would want to tear apart a 964 to make it look like anything other than a 964. They are wonderful looking vehicles, and it's interesting how trends and tastes work. And there certainly, is, let's call it, varying demand for the different series. And we've come all of them are in demand. All the aesthetics of all of the 911s, frankly, are in demand. But there certainly are, certain of them that run hotter than others. And the classic F-Series look, is certainly popular, and one would argue timeless. But there are F-Series cars, and if you want an F-Series car, buy an F-Series car. Do with it what you wish, but buy an F-Series car. Don't buy a G-Series car to make it look like an F-Series car. Buy a 964 to make it look like a G-Series. It's just, to me, an unusual thing. I do appreciate the fact that the 964s are the best candidates for the early 911s in terms of their technology to be able to build, let's call them I don't know, they serve as a good basis to be able to then create or build rest home mods technically. But why one needs to change their look to look like another car is kind of weird, in my opinion, and in the long term, to me, is questionable in terms of value. There are exceptions, most certainly. There are exceptions, and those exceptions are where the aesthetics are that well refined and that well crafted that they are arguably adding value. But if you take a beautiful 964 apart and you lob its fenders off and its bumpers off and try and make it look like something that it isn't, to me it's a monumental step backwards. Stop messing with 964s.